Hey friends, welcome back to Candlelit History. Tonight, I've brought a story that might feel both comforting and unsettling at once. As always, we'll take it slow, no rush, just the soft rhythm of history unfolding. Before we start, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, let the room cool a little. Some of you may already be in bed, eyes growing heavy, others might be just waking up, coffee in hand. Wherever you are, let me know, what time is it, where you're listening, and what's the little ritual you always do before you press play. And of course, if you find yourself coming back to these quiet evenings together, do subscribe, it helps keep the candles burning here. Tonight, we're stepping into a Victorian parlour. On the surface, everything gleams with polished wood and strict respectability, lace curtains, silver teapots, proper manners. But behind those closed doors lies a different world, one that no etiquette book dared to mention. It wasn't gambling, nor secret affairs, nor midnight scandals. No, what seeped into these homes was quieter, more insidious. Bottles of amber liquid, lined neatly on apothecary shelves, advertised in respectable newspapers, and prescribed by trusted physicians. Bottles that promised peace and strength, but instead bound women, wives, mothers, daughters, into a hidden web of dependence. Victorian opium. We begin with Charlotte Winslow, Boston, 1853. She was the very model of a proper lady, running her household with military precision, caring for her children, attending every charitable function without fail. But life had worn her thin. After the painful birth of her youngest child, her doctor prescribed a cordial, just a few drops, morning and evening, to calm her nerves. The taste was bitter, but soon Charlotte felt warmth flow through her chest. Her exhaustion melted, her worries dimmed. What she didn't know was that she had just swallowed liquid opium. A medicine, yes, but one whose grip would only tighten. This is where we begin, at the blurred line between cure and poison, where respectability met addiction in whispers. So settle in. Tonight, we walk together into the drawing rooms of the Victorian age, not through scandal sheets, but through the quiet struggles that polite society refused to name. You wake in a Boston townhouse. The year is 1853. The air is heavy with the scent of polished mahogany and coal smoke drifting faintly from the street. It is early morning, and the house is already alive with the muted sounds of children, Charlotte Winslow's children, running their practiced little steps across polished wooden floors. Charlotte herself is already dressed, corseted, hairpinned neatly, the portrait of composure. From the outside, she is every inch the model of a proper Victorian lady, capable, charitable, unshakably calm. But behind her poised expression lies an exhaustion so deep that no amount of sleep could cure it. Her physician, a man both respected and trusted, had prescribed something for her nervous exhaustion after the difficult birth of her youngest daughter. A cordial, amber in color, just a few drops in water, morning and evening. He assured her it would soothe her nerves, restore her strength, and steady her spirits. Charlotte lifts the tiny glass bottle from her dressing table. The liquid glints like firelight in the morning sun. She adds the drops to water, stirs gently, and sips. The taste is bitter, so bitter it curls the tongue, but within minutes, a change begins. A warmth spreads through her chest, soft and comforting. Her aching body feels lighter. The restless clamor of worry, the endless weight of expectation, both slip away, replaced by an almost dreamy calm. For the first time in weeks, Charlotte can breathe without feeling the tightness in her chest. She can smile without forcing it. It feels like a small miracle. And so, as the days pass, the ritual becomes as natural as lacing her boots or setting the table for supper. A few drops in the morning, a few in the evening. Soon, though, the relief fades more quickly than it once did. The familiar heaviness creeps back sooner, so she takes an extra dose at midday, then another at night, just to be sure she can rest. Charlotte tells herself it is harmless. After all, the medicine is recommended by her doctor, sold in respectable apothecaries, and advertised in newspapers alongside tonics for digestion and syrups for coughs. It isn't some secret vice. It is medicine, and yet slowly, quietly, the pattern deepens. She begins to anticipate the relief before the drops even touch her lips. She feels the faint gnaw of unease. If she waits too long, the little glass bottle empties faster, and faster still. What Charlotte cannot yet see is that she has already stepped onto a path shared by countless women across England and America. Women who believed, as she did, that their medicine was a blessing. Women who would one day find themselves unable to live without it. You can almost picture her at her parlour window, looking out at the cobbled street below, her mind just beginning to cloud with the soft fog of the drug. Her children play in the next room, their laughter muffled, their voices distant, and Charlotte, sitting quietly, feels both more present and yet strangely removed. Calm, yes, but tethered to something she cannot name. This is how it begins, not with scandal or sin, but with trust. A trusted doctor, a trusted medicine, a trusted society. And for Charlotte Winslow, that trust will come at a price she cannot yet imagine. You find yourself in Charlotte's parlour once again. The fire is glowing in the grate, the lace curtains drawn tight against the Boston chill. Afternoon light slants across the room, gilding the edge of a polished teacup. But Charlotte does not reach for the tea. Instead, her hand drifts, almost without thought, toward the slim glass bottle on the side table. Just a few drops, she tells herself. Her physician did say it was medicine, and surely medicine cannot harm. She pours, stirs, sips. The bitter taste bites at her tongue, but the relief is immediate. Her hands, which moments before trembled with fatigue, now steady. Her breath evens. She feels herself floating just a little above the weight of her day. At first, she had needed it only twice, morning and evening, but now midday brings its own demands, and so she has added a third, then a fourth, after supper, to ensure her body can rest. And when the familiar ache of unease creeps into her bones too soon, she does not resist. She pours again. You notice the bottles emptying more quickly now. One every week, then two. Her apothecary does not question it. After all, these preparations are stocked on every counter, their labels as familiar as sugar or salt. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup for infants, Dover's powder for headaches, Godfrey's cordial for restless children, all laced, like Charlotte's cordial, with opium. No one whispers of scandal when these medicines are bought. They are not hidden behind locked doors, but advertised openly in newspapers, alongside household goods. Safe, restorative for nerves, for sleep, for all manner of ailments. And so the pattern spreads quietly, respectably. Women who would never set foot in a tavern, who would never dream of scandal, line their cupboards with bottles. For Charlotte, the line between need and want has already begun to blur. She feels her body reach for the medicine, as naturally as a child reaches for its mother's hand. She cannot quite recall when she last faced a day without it. And yet, when her husband looks at her across the dinner table, he sees only the woman he married, graceful, composed, quietly devoted. When she steps into church on Sunday, no one suspects that her calm smile is bought drop by drop from a bottle. This is the cruelest part. Her world does not see her slipping. Not yet. Respectability cloaks her habit in silence, even as her dependence deepens. And she is not alone. Across England and America, parlours just like hers glow with the same polished warmth, hiding the same quiet bottles. Proper women, mothers, daughters, the angels of the house, all taking their drops, all believing they are in control. But the medicine does not bargain. It gives, then takes. The comfort grows briefer, the ache sharper. And soon, for Charlotte Winslow and countless others, the bottle will no longer soothe, it will command. You sit quietly in Charlotte's parlour, one late evening, the lamps are low, the children asleep upstairs, the house at rest. From the outside, this is the picture of peace, the perfect Victorian household, warm, orderly, respectable. But look a little closer. Charlotte sits by the fire, embroidery resting in her lap. She threads the needle, pulls it through, and pauses. Her hand trembles just slightly. She glances toward the small bottle on the table, beside her chair. Only a little more, she thinks. Just enough to calm the restless ache in her bones, the racing of her heart, the heaviness pressing at the edges of her mind. She pours, stirs, sips. Relief comes, but not as it once did. The warmth is shorter-lived now, the peace less complete. Already she thinks ahead to the next glass, the next small escape. And yet, no one sees. When her husband looks up from his book, he sees only a devoted wife, serene in the glow of the firelight. When friends call the next afternoon, they notice only the neatness of her parlour, the grace of her manners. No one asks about the little bottle. Respectability shields her. This is how the silence spreads. A medicine prescribed by physicians, purchased in plain daylight, praised in advertisements that promise comfort and healing. In truth, it is opium, as dangerous as any forbidden vice. But cloaked in amber glass and medical respectability, it moves unchecked from hand to hand, from mother to daughter, from cradle to grave. Charlotte is not the only one. Across drawing rooms in London, in Yorkshire villages, in New York brownstones, women just like her sit by their firesides, with quiet bottles near at hand. Some take it for headaches, some for nervous exhaustion, others for the trials of childbirth or melancholy. Always the promise is the same: a cure, a calm, an escape. But you see now what they cannot. Each drop binds them closer, each bottle empties more quickly than the last. Dependence creeps silently, disguised as respectability, and Charlotte, dear Charlotte, still believes she can stop whenever she chooses. Still believes it is medicine, not master. She does not yet see that the line between cure and poison has already blurred beyond return. You wake in a colder, quieter place now. Gone are the brick streets of Boston. Before you stands a small parsonage in rural Yorkshire. The stone walls are damp with the morning mist, and the air carries the faint scent of coal smoke drifting across empty fields. Inside, Margaret Thornfield stirs. She is the wife of a minister, her life a rhythm of household duties, parish visits, and unending service. She is respected, admired even, for her devotion. But Margaret carries a private burden. For months she has suffered from what her physician called neuralgia, a vague catch-all word for pains that cannot be explained. Her doctor, well-meaning and trusted, prescribed a cordial laudanum. Just a spoonful to soothe the nerves, to steady the hands, to allow her to continue her good work. And at first it worked wonders. Margaret felt alive again. The aching in her body faded, her energy returned, and she threw herself into parish life with a vigor that astonished even her husband. Charity drives, visits to the sick, endless sewing for the poor. Margaret seemed tireless. But soon the intervals between doses became harder to endure. She would wake in the night, drenched in sweat, her heart racing with a panic she could not name. By day she watched the clock, waiting, always waiting, for the hour when she might take her next dose. When her conscience pricked, she tried to reduce the amount. She measured carefully, sipped sparingly, prayed for strength. But the punishment was swift and brutal. Her hands shook, her stomach twisted, despair washed over her with such force that she thought she might be dying. Her husband, a kind but naive man, never suspected the truth. Addiction to him was a failing of the weak, the immoral, the degenerate. His wife, a minister's wife, pious and good, could never fall so low, so he told himself. And so the silence continued. Margaret suffered alone, as so many women did. Behind the curtains of parsonages, townhouses, and farm cottages, thousands were caught in the same invisible net. The medicine that promised peace delivered only dependence. And because it came from doctors, from apothecaries, from respectable counters, few recognized it for what it was. Margaret Thornfield's nights grew longer. Her prayers, once clear, dissolved into pleas she could scarcely finish. And always, the little bottle waited by her bedside, gleaming faintly in the candlelight. You stand again in the little Yorkshire parsonage. Evening shadows gather along the walls. The day's work finished, the fire burning low. Margaret Thornfield sits alone at the table, her Bible open but unread. The candle flickers, and beside it rests her familiar glass bottle. Her husband has retired early, weary from his parish rounds. He trusts his wife's piety, her devotion, her strength. He has no idea that Margaret's trembling hands are not the result of poor health, but of withdrawal clawing at her bones. Margaret dips the spoon, stirs the cordial into water, and drinks. The bitter taste is sharp, but the calm follows swiftly. Her shoulders loosen, her breath slows. She can think again. She can be the woman her husband believes her to be. But the peace does not last. It never lasts now. She times her doses more carefully, watching the clock with anxious eyes, planning errands around her next chance to sip in secret. She tells herself she is still in control, that this is still medicine, not weakness. Yet in her heart, she knows otherwise. When she tries to resist, the punishment is immediate. Her body rebels, sweats, nausea, uncontrollable shaking. The despair is worst of all, a black weight pressing down, whispering that she will never be free. And so Margaret hides. She sends her maid to the apothecary, with vague instructions, medicine for the neuralgia. She buys from different shops, so no one will suspect how much she truly takes. She claims the cordial is for relatives, or visiting friends, or the children's ailments. She becomes expert at deception, and the shame of it cuts deeper than the physical torment. Victorian women were meant to be paragons of virtue, guardians of the household, gentle and self-controlled. To confess that she cannot master her own medicine would mean disgrace not only for herself, but for her husband, her family, her faith. So she continues in silence, each dose another little lie, each bottle hidden carefully away. She prays, she resolves, she pours medicine down the drain in moments of resolve, only to send the maid rushing out again, hours later. Desperation stronger than conscience. And in this, Margaret is not alone. Across the country, across the ocean, thousands of women are living the same silent tragedy. Some are ministers' wives, some bankers' daughters, some weary mothers of 6. Each believes her struggle is unique, her weakness a shameful secret. But the truth, unspoken, is that an entire generation of women are quietly enslaved by the same bitter cordial. The candle burns low in Margaret's parsonage. She bows her head over her Bible, the words swimming, unread, and beside her, the amber bottle gleams faintly, the true scripture she cannot set aside. Now you walk through London, past lamplighters, on misty streets, past the rumble of carriages and the hum of evening life. You arrive at a grand townhouse in a wealthy district. Tall windows gleam in the gaslight. Servants hurry quietly through back entrances, carrying parcels and firewood. Inside, at the polished mahogany breakfast table, sits Eleanor Hartwell, a banker's wife, surrounded by fine china, fresh flowers, the trappings of refinement. To her friends, Eleanor is the image of elegance, always serene, always composed. But look closer. In her delicate hands, she holds a small pestle, crushing tablets into fine powder. She stirs the dust into her tea, as calmly as if she were adding sugar. The tea darkens, and with it, her secret deepens. Once, liquid cordial was enough. But now, Eleanor's need has grown. The cordial no longer carries her far enough through the day. The powder is stronger, sharper, and she takes it without hesitation. To the outside world, she smiles. She attends charity teas, receives callers in her drawing room, nods graciously at church. But those who know how to look would see the change. Her complexion has grown pale, waxy, her eyes glassy, distant, her movements languid, as though she drifts just outside of reality. Servants notice. Mary O'Brien, her lady's maid, is sent daily on errands to chemists all across the city. Medicine for my sister, for the cook, for a visitor's child, Eleanor says with practiced ease. Mary never questions. To serve is to obey, and besides, the bottles carry respectable labels. But the truth is stark. By now, Eleanor is dosing herself every 2 hours. day and night. Bottles are hidden everywhere, in her jewelry box, behind books in the library, even sewn into the lining of her winter coat. She has become both mistress and prisoner of her household. The woman who once managed her home with precision now forgets whether the cook has been paid or whether the bills are due. She drifts, a ghost in her own life, carried forward by the rhythm of her next dose. When she attends social gatherings, she calculates obsessively. When can she slip away to sip, unseen? How long can she smile and nod before the ache begins again? Sometimes she arrives already heavily medicated, her words slow, her smile too wide, her friends exchanging worried glances. But Victorian etiquette is a shield, no one speaks. Instead, they murmur about her delicate constitution or nervous exhaustion. The silence is her disguise, and also her doom. This is the tragedy of Eleanor Hartwell, not that she hides, but that society helps her hide. Respectability demands silence, and silence allows the poison to spread unchecked. And so, in the grand London townhouse, with flowers on the table and lace at the windows, Eleanor sips her tea, laced with crushed opium, a secret ritual, performed with perfect grace, even as it carries her slowly toward ruin. The morning in London begins with silver trays, polished mirrors, and the clatter of carriage wheels outside. Eleanor Hartwell descends the grand staircase, her gown trailing behind her. To a visitor, she is still every inch the banker's wife, gracious, attentive, her hair arranged with care, but within, she is unraveling. Already, before the day is properly begun, she has taken her first measure. The cordial warms her, blurs the edges of her fatigue, restores the gentle smile her household expects to see. Without it, she cannot face the breakfast table, cannot exchange pleasantries with her husband across the gleaming china. Eleanor tells herself she manages it well, that no one notices, but her maid Mary knows the truth, even if she cannot speak it aloud. She has fetched too many bottles, carried too many coins pressed urgently into her hand. She has hidden too many parcels in quiet drawers. By midday, Eleanor is dosing again, then again by late afternoon. She times her visits carefully, excusing herself during teas and charity gatherings. Sometimes she slips into the powder room, sometimes to an upstairs chamber, the little bottle always at hand. Her friends watch her pale complexion, her strange languor, and whisper only of feminine frailty. This is the shield of respectability, a shared silence. Victorian society had its own language for looking away. A lady did not stumble. She had a weak constitution. A woman who nodded off in company was not drugged, but delicate. When someone wasted away before their eyes, they spoke of nervous exhaustion or a mystery of the heart. And so Eleanor drifts, cocooned in silence. Her husband does not ask. Her friends do not press. Her servants obey. She walks through her own life, as though through a painted room. All the details are in place, but the substance is gone. You see her in the late afternoon, embroidery hoop fallen from her hands, her head bent low as she slips into another opium dream. The flowers on the table are fresh, the curtains tied neatly back, the fire burning bright. But in Eleanor's eyes, there is only distance, glassiness, detachment, a quiet drowning, and still, no one speaks. This is not scandal. It is not crime. It is not whispered in the streets, like gossip. It is a silence thicker than any fog outside her window, and it protects her while it destroys her. The tragedy of Eleanor Hartwell is not simply her addiction, but the polite conspiracy that enables it. Every bottle purchased without question, every symptom explained away, every friend who nods and looks elsewhere, each plays its part in keeping her tethered to the cordial that slowly consumes her, and in this, Eleanor is no different from Charlotte in Boston or Margaret in Yorkshire. Different lives, same silence, same amber bottle gleaming faintly in the firelight. You sit at the edge of 3 different rooms, in 3 different corners of the world, and yet you begin to notice how similar they are. In Boston, Charlotte Winslow lifts her cordial, with practiced hands, her children's laughter muffled beyond the door. In Yorkshire, Margaret Thornfield sits hunched over her Bible, trembling until the bitter medicine steadies her grip. In London, Eleanor Hartwell smiles faintly over her embroidery, the bottle hidden just within reach, her maid carrying yet another parcel back from the chemist. Three women who have never met, who do not know each other's names, and yet their days move in eerie harmony. Morning, the first dose. Afternoon, another, to keep the world from pressing too close. Evening, one more, so sleep will come without the cruel torment of racing thoughts and restless pain. Each believes she is alone. Each believes her weakness is her own secret burden. But together they form part of a silent legion, stretching across the Atlantic, through parlors and kitchens and nurseries. And always, the same silence. Husbands who cannot imagine that respectable wives could falter. Doctors who prescribe more when symptoms grow worse. Friends who see pale skin and dull eyes, and murmur only about delicate nerves. It is not only the women who are caught, but the world around them, unwilling to face what lies inside those amber bottles. Addiction is explained away as illness. Overdose as sudden heart failure. Withdrawal as feminine melancholy, and so the women continue, unseen, unnamed. They send servants to fetch more, they hide bottles in drawers, they count hours until relief returns. Their children learn to tiptoe around their moods. Their households shift quietly to accommodate their absences, and their faith in medicine never quite wavers, even as the cost mounts. If you close your eyes now, you can almost hear the rhythm of it. Bottles uncorked, drops stirred into water, sighs of relief echoing through parlors, across 2 continents. A lullaby of sorts, gentle, bitter, and binding. Charlotte, Margaret, Eleanor, 3 names among thousands, their lives running parallel, their fates entwined by a single ingredient ground into cordial, powder, and syrup. The medicine soothes, the medicine enslaves, and all the while, the world around them pretends nothing is amiss. Step now into a Victorian apothecary. The door opens with a cheerful jingle, and at once you are surrounded by polished shelves lined with bottles, powders, and tinctures. The air smells faintly of alcohol, herbs, and ink from fresh paper labels. This is not a shadowy den or back alley stall. This is a place of trust, of science, of healing, or so it appears. On the counter, neat rows of remedies glint in the lamplight. Dover's powder for headaches, Godfrey's cordial for fretful infants, Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, sold with smiling cherubs printed on its label, Morrison's nerve tonic, advertised to restore strength and calm to overworked ladies. And inside them all, the same ingredient, opium. Here it is sold as casually as cough drops or soap. Mothers purchase bottles for teething babies, grateful for the peace that follows. Physicians prescribe drops for melancholy, for sleeplessness, for childbirth pains. No one whispers of danger. In fact, advertisements boast of safety, promising relief for every ailment, with words like soothing, restorative, gentle. Respectable newspapers carry these ads alongside notices of church events and society weddings. A lady flipping through her morning paper might pause over a glowing testimonial. Mrs. J.W. of Birmingham reports that Dr. Morrison's remedy restored her strength and spirit, saving her marriage. Miss St. of York credits Mrs. Winslow's syrup with curing her melancholy and lifting her faith. Each line reinforces the illusion that these bottles are not only harmless, but virtuous. That to take them is not indulgence, but duty to one's health, to one's family, even to God. And so the epidemic grows in daylight, without stigma, without secrecy. Apothecaries keep their shelves stocked, manufacturers grow wealthy, and physicians continue prescribing. The world insists that all is well, even as women fade behind lace curtains, their lives quietly unraveling, drop by drop. What makes this trade so insidious is precisely its respectability. If opium were confined to smoky dens in the East End, society would condemn it, close its doors, banish its users. But when opium comes in neat bottles with elegant labels, when it is endorsed by doctors and sold beneath bright shop signs, who dares question it? Charlotte in Boston, Margaret in Yorkshire, Eleanor in London, they each believed they were taking medicine, not poison, and who could blame them? The very structures of society told them so. You step back from the apothecary counter, the bell tinkling again as the door closes behind you. The shelves remain, gleaming with amber glass, waiting for the next customer, a mother, a daughter, a wife, a name soon to be forgotten in the silence that follows. Picture yourself holding a Victorian newspaper, its pages crisp, its ink smudging faintly on your fingers. You scan the columns, news of Parliament, shipping schedules, a society wedding reported in glowing detail, and then tucked between the notices, you see it, a small advertisement, bordered with neat lines, promising a miracle in a bottle. For delicate ladies and mothers, overcome with fatigue, Dr. Morrison's Lady's Friend, guaranteed to restore energy and soothe the nerves, available at all respectable apothecaries. Another ad catches your eye, Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup, every mother's ally. Calms fretful infants, ensures peaceful nights, and preserves household harmony, a blessing to every nursery. The words are elegant, the tone reassuring. Nothing here suggests danger. Instead, they suggest duty, that a good wife, a caring mother, a respectable woman should use these remedies, not merely for herself, but for those who depend on her. Testimonies add to the illusion. Carefully crafted letters from satisfied customers fill the spaces between columns of news. A woman from Birmingham credits a tonic with saving her marriage. Another from York claims a cordial restored her joy in God's providence. A mother writes of her baby's quiet sleep, thanks to a soothing syrup. These words are chosen with care. They do not speak of cravings, of trembling hands, of nights spent in silent agony. They speak of virtue, of restored energy, of happiness. And readers flipping through the paper by candlelight believe them. Manufacturers knew what they were doing. They marketed not simply a drug, but an ideal. To take their medicine was to be a better wife, a better mother, a better woman. To refuse it was to neglect one's duty. And so women, already burdened with endless expectations, reached eagerly for the cure that society itself told them was good. Respectable, proper. It is a cruel irony. The very ads that promised salvation were chains in disguise. Behind every neat line of type lay 100 quiet tragedies. A Boston mother staring at an empty bottle. A Yorkshire wife trembling at night. A London banker's lady crushing powders into her tea. The newspapers never mentioned them. The testimonies never told their side, and so the illusion continued. Page after page, bottle after bottle. Respectability sold the poison. Respectability silenced its victims. Step into the office of a Victorian drug manufacturer. The walls are lined not with apothecary jars, but with ledgers, rows of neat figures marching down page after page. The smell here is not of herbs or alcohol, but of ink and paper, the scent of commerce. Behind the desk sits a man in a waistcoat, spectacles perched on his nose. He does not think of suffering women, of sleepless children, of trembling hands. He thinks of profit margins, of expanding markets, of clever advertising campaigns. Opium has become an empire. Pharmaceutical companies build fortunes on patent medicines, their names whispered from one household to another with trust. They sponsor articles in medical journals, ensuring doctors repeat their claims. They commission artists to design labels that glow with cherubs, flowers, and soft colors, images of innocence wrapped around bottles of poison. When whispers of danger surface, when physicians note alarming patterns of dependence, manufacturers are ready. They fund counter-studies, publish reassurances, and shift the blame. Infant deaths, poor sanitation, women wasting away, weak constitutions. Mental decline, a mystery illness. Anything but the medicine. Inside their archives, private letters tell a different story. Reports from customers begging for help, describing bottles emptied too quickly, trembling bodies that could not do without. But these letters never see the light of day. They are filed, set aside, or quietly ignored. To acknowledge them would mean slowing the golden flow of income. The strategy is simple. Keep the shelves full, keep the papers printing, keep the doctors prescribing. As long as respectability cloaks the trade, no one dares challenge it. And as long as demand grows, the profits rise. Meanwhile, in parlours and nurseries, in townhouses and cottages, women sip their doses, mothers feed their infants syrups, husbands reassure themselves that their wives are simply frail. The machine turns, fueled by silence and money. You can almost hear the rhythm, the scratching of pens in ledgers, the clink of glass bottles packed into crates, the rustle of newspapers bearing fresh promises. All of it humming along, indifferent to the slow ruin behind lace curtains. In this, the true face of the epidemic comes clear, not scandal, not sin, but commerce. Profits built on quiet suffering, fortunes founded on respectable addiction. The Boston townhouse is quiet, the lamps glowing warmly against the evening frost. Charlotte Winslow sits in her parlour, her embroidery hoop resting uselessly in her lap. She is waiting. Not for visitors, not for her husband's return, not even for her children's footsteps on the stairs. She is waiting for the hour. On the mantel, the clock ticks steadily, each swing of its pendulum a reminder of how long it has been since her last dose. Her hands tremble slightly, though she folds them tightly in her lap to hide it from herself. Her chest feels hollow, her breath shallow. She rises at last, almost in a trance, and moves toward the small bottle on her writing desk. A few drops in water, bitter sharp. The warmth spreads quickly, and Charlotte exhales as though she has been holding her breath all day. Relief washes over her, her hands steady, her thoughts clear. She can smile again, but the smile fades too quickly now. The peace lasts an hour, perhaps two, before the unease returns. She finds herself sipping more often, the bottle emptying in half the time it once did. And so she begins to hide it. A bottle tucked into her sewing basket. Another slipped into the drawer of her dressing table. A third placed in a small cabinet in the nursery, disguised among the children's medicines. She tells herself it is only practicality, only ensuring she will not be caught without it when she needs it most. But deep inside, she knows she is guarding a secret. Her husband does not notice. Or perhaps he does, and chooses not to see. He compliments her devotion, her calm. He thanks her for managing the household so perfectly, never suspecting the price of her composure. Her children notice. In their own way, they learn when to approach their mother, and when to keep quiet. They sense the rhythm of her moods, the moments when she is warm and cheerful, and the moments when her eyes seem distant, her touch absent. They adapt as children do, never knowing the reason. Charlotte tells herself she is still in control, that she could stop, if she wished, that the medicine is hers to command. But the clock on the mantel tells another story. Each swing of its pendulum brings not freedom but fear. Fear of what will happen if the next dose is delayed. And so Charlotte sits once more in the glow of the fire, her embroidery untouched, her mind already counting the minutes until the bottle calls again. The Yorkshire parsonage lies silent under a grey sky. The fire in the grate has burned down to embers, the clock ticks faintly in the hall, and Margaret Thornfield lies awake in her narrow bed. Her husband sleeps beside her, his breathing steady, the peace of a man untroubled by unseen burdens. Margaret, though, clutches the bedsheets, her body trembling with a restlessness that will not relent. Her cordial bottle sits on the bedside table. She has told herself she will resist tonight, that she must not let this medicine rule her life. She prayed before lying down, whispered pleas into the darkness. But as the hours drag on, her resolve unravels. First comes the sweat, dampness across her brow, soaking into her nightdress. Then the racing of her heart, a pounding that seems to shake her very ribs. Her stomach twists, nausea rising until she thinks she may cry out. Worst of all is the despair, a black tide rolling over her, whispering that she is weak, that she is lost, that she is beyond help. She turns her face into the pillow, pressing it tight to stifle the sobs that threaten to escape. She must not wake her husband, he must never know. At last, in desperation, she reaches for the bottle. Her hands shake so badly, she spills a few drops onto the sheet. She drinks quickly, swallowing against the bitter taste. Relief comes, not instantly, but slowly, like warmth seeping into frozen fingers. Her heartbeat steadies, her breath eases. The despair lifts just enough for her to rest. And then the guilt arrives. Margaret lies back, staring at the ceiling beams faintly lit by the dying embers of the fire. She tells herself she has failed again, that she lacks the strength of other women. She promises that tomorrow will be different, that tomorrow she will stop. She makes these vows as earnestly as her morning prayers. But in her heart, she knows tomorrow will come, and with it the same gnawing need, the same trembling hands, the same quiet surrender. She is trapped, yet she dares not speak. To admit her dependence would be to confess not only weakness, but sin. A minister's wife, enslaved by medicine, unthinkable. She tells herself it is better to bear the shame in silence than to bring disgrace upon her husband and his parish. And so Margaret turns her face toward the window, where dawn is beginning to grey the horizon. Another night survived. Another secret carried forward. Another quiet battle, lost in a war she never chose. The lamps glow warmly in a grand London drawing room. Silver spoons clink against porcelain cups, and the soft murmur of conversation fills the air. A half-dozen ladies sit in a neat circle, their gowns rustling as they lean forward politely, their smiles fixed just so. At the center of it all is Eleanor Hartwell, a banker's wife, admired for her elegance. She presides with practiced grace. She pours tea, asks after children, nods in sympathy at minor ailments. To anyone looking, she is the very image of refinement. But you notice the strain. Her smile lingers a beat too long. Her words come more slowly than they should. When she rises to fetch more cakes, her step falters almost imperceptibly. The ladies glance at one another, their expressions flickering with concern, but no one speaks it aloud. Eleanor excuses herself midway through the afternoon. A touch of nerves, she murmurs, slipping from the room. In truth, she hurries to the powder room upstairs, where a small vial waits in her reticule. She measures quickly, drinks, steadies herself in the mirror. Pale face, glassy eyes, but composed enough to return. When she descends again, she is calm, even cheerful. The ladies smile politely, as though nothing is amiss. They murmur of her delicate constitution, of her ongoing treatments, and continue their chatter about fashions and parish events. This is the code of Victorian society: silence. A lady's struggle is never spoken aloud, never named. Respectability demands that everyone pretend not to notice. But the truth is harder to disguise. Eleanor's complexion has lost its rosy bloom. Her eyes, once bright, now carry a distant, dreamlike glaze. She sometimes nods mid-conversation, her embroidery slipping from her hands, her smile frozen even as she drifts. Her husband notices, though he does not admit it. He tells himself she is tired, that she bears her burdens with saintly patience. He reassures himself with the physician's words, nervous exhaustion, a touch of frailty. That she takes her medicine faithfully is, in his mind, proof of her virtue, not her dependence. And so Eleanor continues, drifting, dosing, concealing. Her social circle closes around her, in polite complicity, shielding her from shame, while quietly watching her decline. It is a performance, and everyone plays their part. But behind the lace curtains and candlelit tables, the truth is there for any who dare to look. Eleanor is no longer mistress of her household. She is captive to the little bottles that she hides in reticules, in jewelry boxes, even stitched into the lining of her winter cloak. At tea, she laughs too brightly. At home, she douces too often. And beneath the silence of her circle lies the quiet understanding that one day Eleanor Hartwell may not return from her powder room at all. The Winslow household hums with the sounds of daily life, footsteps on the polished stairs, the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the laughter of children echoing through the hall. To neighbors and visitors, it appears the picture of domestic harmony. But within, the pattern is shifting. Charlotte sits by the parlor window, her embroidery once again resting unfinished in her lap. She has taken her cordial, and for the moment, her mood is light. Her voice is gentle as she calls her children to her side, listening with patient smiles as they chatter about their lessons and their games. But soon, too soon, the cordial begins to fade. Her cheer ebbs, her smile stiffens. The children, though young, notice. They learn to sense the rhythm of their mother's moods. When her voice grows sharp, when her eyes seem distant, they retreat to the corners of the house. When her warmth returns, they creep back cautiously, eager for her attention before it slips away again. One evening, her eldest daughter brings her a picture she has drawn, clumsy crayon strokes of a mother and child hand in hand. Charlotte smiles faintly, but her hand trembles as she takes it. The cordial's comfort has already begun to wear thin. She sets the drawing aside, her attention drifting, her thoughts fixed on the bottle in the next room. The child lingers a moment, then slips away quietly, unremarked. Charlotte does not see the hurt in her daughter's eyes. She does not see how her younger son pauses before entering the parlour, gauging her expression before daring to speak. She does not hear the whispered conversations between her children, trying to make sense of why their mother sometimes seems so near and other times so far away. This is the cruelest theft of all, not just of Charlotte's health, but of her presence. The cordial numbs her pain, but it also dulls her laughter, her tenderness, her capacity to meet her children in the fullness of their joy and sorrow. And yet, Charlotte believes she is doing this for them. Without her medicine, she tells herself, she would be too frail to manage the household, too weak to care for them. She sees the cordial as her shield, her strength. She cannot imagine that it is, in truth, the very thing drawing her away from them. In the nursery, the children whisper. They are learning to live around the rhythm of the bottle, though they do not yet know its name. They will carry these lessons of vigilance, of silence, of tiptoeing around unseen moods, long after Charlotte's parlour has grown quiet. And still the clock ticks on, marking the hours, until Charlotte will rise once more, pour a few bitter drops, and smile again, briefly, before the cycle repeats. The Yorkshire parsonage stands quiet in the late afternoon, the faint toll of a church bell drifting across the fields. Inside, Margaret Thornfield sits in her chair by the hearth, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She is pale, her brow damp, her eyes sunken with exhaustion. Her husband, the minister, watches her with growing concern. He has noticed the changes. The bright vigour with which she once organised parish visits has dulled. The woman who bustled from dawn to dusk with energy enough for 10 now spends hours alone, withdrawn and weary. When he asks, she smiles faintly and murmurs about poor health, about nerves, about a constitution that has always been fragile. He accepts this explanation, repeating the phrases the physician has used: nervous exhaustion, delicate weakness. Words that soothe, but explain nothing. Margaret longs to tell him. There are moments when the cordial wears off, when the shame presses hardest, when she imagines confessing everything. She pictures herself laying the little bottle in his hands, begging him to help her resist. But the words die in her throat. He has spoken from the pulpit of temperance, of the perils of moral weakness. He has preached that addiction is the fate of the degenerate, the sinful, the fallen. How could she, a minister's wife, admit that she is enslaved by the very medicine meant to heal her? And so the silence continues. Margaret hides her bottles in drawers, behind books, beneath folded linens. She sends the maid to different chemists in neighbouring villages, inventing ailments for distant relatives. She times her doses carefully, slipping them between household tasks, hiding her trembling hands behind the folds of her skirts. Her husband, kind but blind, believes she suffers from mysterious illness. When she grows irritable, he attributes it to fatigue. When she grows distant, he assumes she is lost in prayer. When she wakes in the night, drenched in sweat and gasping, he soothes her with whispered hymns, never guessing that she is battling the claws of withdrawal. And so Margaret lives two lives: the minister's wife, pious and dutiful, admired by her neighbours, and the captive of a cordial bottle, her hours governed not by faith or duty, but by the ebb and flow of a drug she cannot name aloud. Her husband begins to read aloud from scripture, his voice calm, steady, full of certainty. Margaret nods, though she hears little. Her mind is fixed on the bottle in the drawer beside her chair. She knows she cannot last until evening prayers without it. And so, while her husband reads of strength and virtue, Margaret reaches quietly for the drawer. The cordial glints in the firelight, her secret salvation and her secret shame. The fog rolls thick along London's streets, carriages rattling past as lamplighters move from post to post. Inside the Hartwell townhouse, all is polished brass and soft carpets, the sort of home that projects stability and grace. But within, Eleanor Hartwell is unraveling. She sits in her drawing room, her embroidery fallen once again from her lap. The fire glows, the clock ticks, but Eleanor drifts, her chin sinking slowly to her chest. Her maid finds her thus, half asleep, her teacup tilting dangerously toward the carpet. Mary O'Brien carefully sets the cup aside and withdraws without a word. To mention it would be unthinkable. Servants observe, but servants do not speak. Later, Eleanor dresses for a charity function. Her gown is immaculate, her jewels carefully chosen, her smile fixed before the mirror. But her step down the grand staircase is slow, her movements languid. When she greets her friends, her words are too deliberate, her laughter a shade too hollow. Around her, whispers rise, though never in her presence. Poor Mrs. Hartwell, her constitution has grown so delicate. She is often unwell these days, yet so brave to attend. These are the phrases that shield her, the polite fiction that maintains her standing. But in truth, Eleanor is no longer managing her secret with the same precision. Her doses are closer together, her hiding places more numerous, bottles tucked into her husband's brandy decanter, powders folded into handkerchiefs, little vials hidden in her sewing box. She cannot risk being caught without them, not even for an hour. At social gatherings, her friends have begun to notice the faint glaze in her eyes, the moments when she slips away too often, the times she returns flushed and trembling. Yet Victorian etiquette demands silence. Better to say nothing, to nod, to pretend. Only Mary O'Brien, her maid, sees the full extent. She is sent across the city each day, buying medicines under different names, carrying parcels to and fro. She does not question, though she wonders. She sees the growing desperation in her mistress's eyes, the way Eleanor clutches the bottles as though they alone tether her to life. In the evenings, Eleanor sits by the fire, her body heavy with the drug. She smiles faintly when her husband enters, but her words drift, unfocused. He pats her hand, murmurs about her fragile health, and believes the matter settled. He does not see what Mary sees. He does not hear the rustle of hidden bottles behind books, or the faint clink of glass as Eleanor slips another vial into her gown. The cracks are there now, clear for any who dare to look, but no one dares. Respectability demands silence, and silence is the perfect accomplice. And so Eleanor Hartwell continues her decline, smiling in candlelight, her secret wrapped in lace and jewels, even as her world grows smaller with every drop. The Winslow townhouse glows in the evening lamplight. Supper has been served, the children tucked into bed, the household slipping into its nightly rhythm. Charlotte sits across from her husband in the parlour, the firelight soft upon her face. She smiles, asks after his business, listens politely as he recounts the day's affairs. Tonight, something unsettles him. He watches her hands. They are steady now, but he remembers how they trembled earlier when she reached for her teacup. He notices her pallor, the faint hollowness beneath her eyes, the way her smile seems to falter when she thinks he isn't looking. "Are you unwell, my dear?" he asks gently. Charlotte shakes her head, her smile practiced. "Only tired. You know how the days wear on me." He nods, accepting though uneasily. He recalls that the physician has spoken of nervous exhaustion, of the strain borne by women who keep large households. but still, a shadow lingers in his mind. When she rises to fetch her embroidery, he notices the small bottle glinting on the writing desk. He has seen it often, though he has never paid it much heed. Medicine, prescribed and proper, yet lately he wonders why it seems always near to hand, always emptier than before. He does not speak of it. To accuse, even to question, feels ungentlemanly. A husband must trust his wife, must not pry into her private remedies. And yet the doubt remains, like a faint draught under a closed door. Charlotte, for her part, feels his gaze. She tells herself he suspects nothing, but in her heart she knows his eyes linger too long on the bottle, that his voice carries a note of unease, and so she begins to hide it more carefully. A vial in her sewing basket, another slipped into the nursery cabinet, another tucked discreetly beneath folded linens. She convinces herself it is only prudence, but the truth is simpler. She does not wish him to see. The silence between them deepens. He wonders but does not ask. She hides but does not confess. Both tell themselves it is nothing, that her health is fragile, that his trust is firm, but the clock on the mantel keeps its steady rhythm, marking each hour until Charlotte must rise once more, unseen, and pour another bitter dose. The parsonage sits beneath a heavy sky, the last embers of the day fading into grey. Inside, the household is quiet. The maid has finished her duties, the lamps are trimmed, the minister has retreated to his study with his sermons. Margaret Thornfield sits in the sitting room, the cordial bottle hidden neatly beneath a stack of folded linens in the cupboard. She has already taken her measure, and for the moment her body is calm, but her mind is restless. She watches her husband through the doorway, bent over his Bible, his lips moving silently with familiar verses. He seems a man of unshakable certainty, every thought ordered, every conviction firm. And Margaret feels, as she so often does, that she is living two lives, the dutiful wife at his side, and the trembling captive of a medicine she dares not name. When he joins her at the fire, his eyes linger on her face. "You are not yourself these days, Margaret," he says softly. "Your colour is poor, your strength falters." She smiles faintly, deflecting. "It is only weariness. The winter air is heavy, and my constitution has never been strong." He accepts her words, but unease flickers in his eyes. He has noticed her absences, her sudden retreats to the bedchamber, her trembling hands when she believes herself unseen. He wonders, perhaps, but his mind never touches the truth. For what minister's wife could be enslaved by such a thing? Margaret feels the gulf widening between them. She longs in secret moments to tell him everything, to place the bottle in his hands and beg him to help her stop. But then she remembers his sermons, the fiery words against indulgence, the stern condemnations of weakness, and she swallows the confession before it can form. Instead, she deepens her deceptions. She sends the maid farther afield to buy fresh bottles, inventing new reasons with practiced ease. She pretends to nap when in truth she is curled against her pillow, waiting for the medicine to take hold. She feigns headaches to avoid visitors, so no one will see her pallor, her trembling. The shame grows heavier than the sickness itself. In prayer she begs for deliverance. In silence she tells herself each dose will be the last. And yet, when the darkness presses too hard, when her body cries out with sweat and shaking, she reaches again for the cordial, her hand steady only in that moment of surrender. Her husband believes she is fragile but faithful. Margaret knows she is neither. She is trapped between her husband's image of her and the secret she carries, between her prayers and her bottles, between her longing for freedom and her fear of disgrace. And so the parsonage glows with firelight, the minister reading aloud from scripture, his voice calm and steady. Margaret listens with bowed head, her face serene, but beneath her folded hands, hidden in her skirts, rests the key to her composure, the little glass bottle, glinting faintly as the flames dance. The Hartwell townhouse glows with lamplight, its polished brass and velvet curtains meant to impress the evening's guests. A small gathering has assembled in the drawing room. Ladies in silks, gentlemen in waistcoats, the air filled with polite laughter and the faint scent of wine. At the centre, as always, sits Eleanor Hartwell. She greets her guests with gracious smiles, offers tea, and asks after their children. But the cracks are showing. Her complexion is pale, her eyes glassy. She leans a little too heavily against the arm of her chair. When she rises to pour, her hand trembles, spilling a few drops of tea onto the saucer. The guests notice just barely, but they say nothing. Instead, they murmur to one another about her poor health, her delicate nerves. Midway through the evening, Eleanor excuses herself. She ascends the staircase slowly, her skirts brushing the carpet, her steps unsteady. Behind the closed door of her bedchamber, she pulls a small vial from her reticule, her hands shaking as she uncorks it. A measure into water, bitter and burning, and soon her body steadies. She glances at her reflection in the mirror, pale cheeks, heavy eyes, lips curved into a practiced smile. She powders her face, straightens her gown, and returns to her guests. But the illusion is thinner now. Her laugh comes too quickly, too brightly. Her conversation drifts, sentences trailing off mid-thought. Twice, her friends notice her eyelids droop, as though she might doze even as she speaks. The gentlemen are polite, the ladies sympathetic. They do not speak of it openly, but when the evening ends and the carriages carry them home, whispers begin. Mrs. Hartwell is failing. Her nerves, poor thing, such a shame. Her husband hears these whispers too. He assures himself it is nothing more than exhaustion, the strain of social obligations. He thanks Providence that she takes her medicines faithfully, never suspecting that the very bottles he approves are the cause of her decline. In the quiet after the guests have gone, Eleanor sinks into her chair, her face pale in the dying firelight. Mary O'Brien, her maid, clears away the cups in silence, her eyes lingering on her mistress, with a mixture of pity and dread. The performance has been kept, but just barely. Respectability shields Eleanor still, but the cracks are widening, and soon even silence may not be enough. The Winslow townhouse stands in lamplight, children tucked into bed, the quiet hum of the city drifting faintly through shuttered windows. Charlotte sits at her writing desk, the little cordial bottle half hidden among papers and quills. Her husband enters the room, book in hand. He pauses when he sees her, her posture too still, her expression faintly distant. He studies her for a long moment before speaking. "You've seemed unwell, Charlotte," he says gently. "More than weary. Are you sure the doctor's medicine is helping you?" Charlotte looks up, startled, her hand tightening around the edge of the desk. She forces a smile. "It is nothing, only fatigue. The cordial eases me, you know that." He hesitates. His eyes fall to the bottle, then back to her face. "It seems you depend on it often," he murmurs. His tone is not accusing, only searching, but the words strike like a blow. Charlotte's heart quickens. She wants to protest, to assure him she is in control, that she could stop whenever she chooses. But her throat tightens around the lie. Instead, she lowers her gaze, her fingers brushing the glass, as though to shield it from him. Her husband does not press further. A gentleman does not pry into his wife's private remedies, does not question the physician's orders. To do so would be improper, even unkind. And so he swallows his unease, offering only a faint smile, before turning back to his book. But the silence between them has changed. Charlotte feels it heavy in the air, a question unasked, but hovering nonetheless. She resolves to be more careful, to hide her bottles better, to measure her doses unseen, to maintain the illusion of perfect composure. Yet that very night, when the cordial's comfort fades too soon, she rises quietly from the bed and tiptoes to the desk. She pours another dose, her hands trembling. Behind her, her husband stirs, but does not wake. Charlotte drinks quickly, the warmth rushing through her veins, the unease melting away. Relief floods her, but it is tainted now by fear. Fear that he suspects. fear that one day he may ask again, not gently, but firmly. And so she clings tighter to her secret, convinced that to confess would be to unravel not only herself, but the entire image of their respectable household.
As the cordial soothes her,
But the silence now binds her just as tightly. The parsonage lies beneath a sky, heavy with winter clouds. Snow presses against the windows, muffling the world in silence. Inside, the fire burns low, and Margaret Thornfield kneels beside her bed, her hands clasped, her head bowed in prayer. She whispers the words she has spoken since girlhood, pleas for strength, for deliverance, for forgiveness. But tonight, the words falter. Her body shivers with the familiar torment, clammy skin, racing heart, a gnawing dread that grows sharper with every minute she resists. Her husband sleeps peacefully in the next room, trusting his wife's devotion, certain of her piety. Margaret clings to that image, desperate to uphold it. But as the tremors rack her, her prayers dissolve into tears. She rises at last, her resolve broken. From beneath a folded blanket she draws the small bottle, its glass cold in her hand. She hesitates only a moment, then pours, drinks, and swallows the bitter dose. Relief spreads slowly, her body loosening, her breath evening, but with the comfort comes shame. She sinks into the chair by the fire, the Bible still open on the table before her. Its words blur through her tears. She whispers, "Forgive me," though she knows she will fail again tomorrow. In her heart, Margaret believes she is sinning, not only against herself, but against God. The cordial meant to heal has become an idol, a false refuge she cannot renounce. She fears that her prayers rise no higher than the rafters, weighted down by her dependence. And yet she cannot stop. The dual life is crushing her. By day she greets parishioners with gentle smiles, assures her husband she is merely weary, and carries herself as the devoted minister's wife. By night she trembles and weeps, clutching the little bottle as though it were her only salvation. Her maid has begun to notice, sent farther and farther afield, to chemists in neighboring villages. She raises no questions, but her eyes linger on Margaret with quiet worry. Margaret sees it, feels it, and despises herself for needing even her servant to play a part in her deception. The shame grows heavier than the sickness itself, and yet the sickness always wins. The snow thickens outside, blanketing the parsonage in silence. Margaret sits in the fire's dim glow, the cordial warm in her veins, the Bible still open before her. She stares at the page without seeing it, the verses lost to her. Her prayers tonight are broken, tomorrow's will be too. The Hartwell townhouse blazes with light. Tonight, Eleanor's husband has opened his doors to a circle of friends and business associates, the kind of gathering where fortunes are secured over glasses of port and polite conversation. Eleanor, as mistress of the house, is expected to shine. She appears in a gown of pale silk, jewels glinting at her throat, her smile fixed as she greets each guest. But beneath the shimmer lies fragility. Her complexion is too pale, her eyes glassy, her step unsteady. As the evening progresses, she grows more languid. When she lifts a teacup, her hand trembles slightly, and when she speaks, her words drift into pauses too long to be polite. The ladies exchange sidelong glances, their murmured sympathy hidden behind fans. Poor Mrs. Hartwell, her nerves are failing her again. At one moment, Eleanor excuses herself abruptly, rising from her chair with a faint sway. She ascends the stairs, her hand tight against the banister, her breathing shallow. In her chamber, she fumbles for the vial, tucked into her reticule, her hands shaking as she pours. The bitter draught steadies her. She powders her face quickly, pins a fresh ribbon at her throat, and forces herself to return. But the mask is slipping. Her husband notices when she drifts into silence, mid-conversation with a guest, her gaze fixed on nothing. He notices when her laughter comes too loudly, too brightly, ringing false in the lamplight. He notices, but he does not name it. To acknowledge it aloud would break the fragile shield of respectability on which his household depends. The guests continue their chatter, their sympathy growing with each glance at Eleanor's pale face. They murmur of her delicate health, of the strain of society life, of the burden of her charitable works. All the while, they avert their eyes from the truth that lingers like smoke in the room. Only Mary O'Brien, her maid, knows the full extent. She waits in the shadows of the hall, watching her mistress move stiffly among her guests, knowing that beneath the silk and jewels, Eleanor is held together only by the quiet bottles hidden in every corner of the house. The evening ends. The last carriage rattles away into the fog. Eleanor sinks into her chair by the fire, her body heavy, her mind clouded. Her husband closes the door behind him, his face lined with unease. He does not speak, but the silence between them has grown darker, heavier. Respectability has shielded her for so long, but now the cracks are wide enough for anyone to see, if only they dared to look. The Winslow dining room glows with lamplight, polished silver gleaming against crisp white linen. The children chatter softly over their supper, their father asking polite questions about lessons and play. Charlotte sits at the head of the table, her posture composed, her smile measured. But tonight, her husband's gaze lingers on her more than on the children. He notices the pallor of her skin, the faint shadows beneath her eyes, the way her hand trembles as she lifts her fork. "Charlotte," he says at last, his voice calm but firm, "you are not yourself. This medicine the doctor gave you, it troubles me." The children fall silent, sensing the weight in his tone. Charlotte forces a smile. "It eases me, nothing more. Without it, I could not manage the household. You would not wish me to neglect my duties, would you?" Her husband frowns, his eyes flicking toward the sideboard where a small bottle rests, half concealed behind a vase of flowers. He has seen how quickly they empty, how often Charlotte excuses herself from the table, how her moods rise and fall with uncanny rhythm. "I wonder," he murmurs, "if the cure has not become worse than the ailment." Charlotte's cheeks flush. For a moment she cannot meet his gaze. Then she straightens, her voice cool. "I do as the physician instructs. Would you have me defy his wisdom? Would you have me collapse from exhaustion?" The children exchange uneasy glances. The room, once full of gentle chatter, is now tense with silence. Her husband sighs and says no more, unwilling to press in front of the little ones. But later that night, as Charlotte sits by the fire with her embroidery untouched in her lap, she feels the weight of his eyes upon her. She knows he is watching, waiting, though he does not speak. She feels the gulf widening between them, his trust fraying, her secrecy deepening. And still, when the unease creeps back into her body, she rises quietly, pours the cordial, and drinks. The warmth spreads through her chest, easing the ache, calming her nerves. For a moment she feels whole again, but the warmth is now tainted by fear. Fear that he knows too much. Fear that one day he will demand an answer she cannot give. The cordial soothes her body, but it cannot mend the fracture that has begun at her own table. The Yorkshire parsonage lies hushed beneath a steady drizzle, the garden paths slick with rain. Inside, Margaret Thornfield paces the narrow hall, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. She feels the familiar restlessness crawling through her limbs, the gnawing ache that no amount of prayer will ease. Her husband is away on parish calls. The maid is scrubbing in the kitchen. Margaret slips into the bedroom, closes the door softly, and opens the drawer where she keeps her secret. The cordial bottle gleams faintly in the dim light. She pours with practiced speed, drinks, and sinks into the chair. The relief spreads slowly, loosening her trembling hands, softening the knot in her chest. She exhales, head bent, whispering to herself that this will be the last. Tomorrow she will stop. Tomorrow she will be free. But she has whispered these same words 100 times before. The shame eats at her as surely as the drug itself. She cannot look at her husband without feeling the weight of her deception. She avoids the eyes of her parishioners, fearing they will see through her composure. Even her maid's quiet glances feel like judgment. Margaret invents new strategies to conceal her need. She hides bottles in flour, bins, in sewing baskets, in the hollow of a Bible whose pages she has carefully cut away. She sends the maid on errands to villages farther off, claiming the cordial is for cousins, for an elderly aunt, for parish children. The lies come easily now, practiced and smooth, yet each one leaves her hollow. At night she lies beside her husband, her body heavy with the drug, her mind clouded. She listens to his steady breathing, his whispered prayers before sleep, his faith that their household is one of order and virtue. She turns her face to the wall, clutching her pillow, and feels the gulf widen between them. Her health is failing. Her cheeks have lost their color, her step its quickness. She excuses herself from parish visits more often, blaming headaches or chills. Parishioners murmur of her fragility, pity in their voices. No one suspects the truth. Margaret wonders, in her darkest moments, whether God has turned his face from her. She wonders if her prayers, broken and faltering, can still rise above the rafters. She wonders if she will die with her secret, her shame sealed inside the walls of the parsonage. And still, when the unease creeps back, when her body cries out in trembling desperation, she reaches for the bottle once more. The rain beats softly against the windows. The parsonage stands quiet, and Margaret Thornfield lives another day in hiding, bound tighter with every drop she swears will be her last. The Hartwell dining room is lit with glittering chandeliers, polished silver, and the low hum of conversation. A small party has gathered, business partners of Eleanor's husband, their wives seated beside them. The evening is meant to be one of refinement, a quiet display of prosperity and grace. Eleanor enters in a gown of pale blue silk, her hair pinned neatly, a string of pearls at her throat. She smiles as she takes her seat, her voice soft and practiced. Yet the glaze in her eyes betrays her. Her husband sees it at once, but says nothing, nodding politely to his guests, as though all is well. The courses arrive. Soup, fish, roast fowl. Eleanor lifts her fork but fumbles, the silver slipping against her plate with a sharp clang. Conversation falters. She recovers quickly, laughing too brightly, murmuring about her clumsiness. The guests smile, but unease passes through the room like a shadow. Halfway through the meal, Eleanor excuses herself. She rises too quickly, sways, and grasps the back of her chair to steady herself. Her husband's hand twitches toward her arm, but he restrains himself. To acknowledge her weakness before his guests would be to admit something he cannot. Upstairs, Eleanor stumbles into her chamber. Mary O'Brien is waiting. As always, wordless, the maid produces a vial from the sewing basket. Eleanor drinks swiftly, shuddering as the bitterness burns her throat. The trembling subsides. She powders her face, steadies her breath, and forces herself back down the stairs. When she returns, she is calm again, almost radiant. She laughs too freely, gestures too widely, her voice carrying louder than the others. The wives exchange glances, their fans fluttering to disguise whispered words. The men clear their throats, steering the conversation back to business. Her husband forces a smile, his jaw tight. He praises the roast, lifts his glass, keeps the evening moving. But in his eyes is something new, not just unease, but a flicker of anger. The supper ends. The guests depart with polite courtesies, their faces drawn. The carriage wheels fade into the London fog. Eleanor collapses into a chair, her body heavy, her smile gone. Her husband stands at the doorway, watching her silently. He says nothing, but the silence between them is colder than any words. Respectability has protected them both for so long, but tonight the mask has slipped, and those who dined at their table will not forget what they saw. The Winslow parlour glows with firelight, shadows flickering across the polished wood. Charlotte sits with her embroidery, untouched, her gaze fixed on the mantel clock. Her husband sits opposite, a book in his lap, though he has not turned a page in many minutes. At last he closes it with a sharp sound. Charlotte, he says, his voice low but steady. I must speak plainly. This medicine of yours, it has become too much. Her head lifts, her smile carefully composed. It is the doctor's prescription. Surely you would not have me ignore his orders. He studies her, his eyes lingering on the faint tremor in her hands, the pallor of her cheeks. You take it more often than he ever intended. I have seen how quickly the bottles empty. I have seen how you change when it wears off. Charlotte's breath catches. For a moment her mask falters. She recovers swiftly, her tone cool, defensive. You exaggerate. I am tired, nothing more. Would you rather I collapse beneath my duties? Would you rather I be of no use to you, to our children? Her husband's jaw tightens. I would rather you be yourself again. Not this. He stops, unwilling to speak the word that hovers between them, addiction. It would be vulgar, improper, unthinkable. The silence stretches. The clock ticks, marking the rhythm of Charlotte's pulse, quick and unsteady. At last she rises, her dignity wrapped around her like a cloak. I will not be lectured for following a physician's counsel, she says. If you doubt me, then you doubt the very science you claim to respect. She leaves the room, her steps steady until the door closes behind her. Only then does she press a trembling hand to her chest, her breath ragged. She knows he is right. She knows the cordial has taken more from her than it ever gave. But she cannot stop. Upstairs in the quiet of her chamber, she opens a drawer and lifts another bottle, hidden away from his eyes. She pours, drinks, and feels the warmth spread through her once more. Relief, sweet and fleeting. Downstairs, her husband sits by the fire, staring into the flames. He feels the distance between them widen, a gulf bridged only by silence and fear. He tells himself he must act, must speak again, must find a way to reach her. But for now he says nothing. And so they live in separate rooms of the same house, he in his unease, she in her secret, both bound by the bitter cordial that lies between them. The Yorkshire parsonage stands beneath a grey sky, the fields outside, sodden with spring rain. Inside, Margaret Thornfield moves slowly through her household tasks, her body weary, her steps unsteady. Her husband has begun to notice. At table he watches her pick listlessly at her food, her cheeks pale, her frame thinner than before. Parishioners remark with concern on her failing health, praising her courage, pitying her delicate constitution. The words soothe him, reassure him that his wife suffers no fault of her own. But Margaret knows the truth. Each morning she wakes with trembling hands, her body clammy, her heart racing. She forces herself to dress, to smile, to meet the eyes of those who look to her as an example of devotion. But beneath the calm exterior, her body cries out for relief. The cordial is both her torment and her salvation. She hates it, despises the way it chains her life to its rhythm, and yet she cannot face a day without it. Her doses have grown larger, more frequent, the bottle emptying faster than before. The strain shows, her once bright eyes are dulled, her movements slowed. She stumbles when she rises too quickly, leans against door frames for support. Her maid hovers nearby, fetching bottles without question, but her eyes are heavy with unspoken worry. Margaret tries to hide the worst of it from her husband. She takes to her bed with headaches, claims weakness to avoid long parish calls. But he sees more than she realizes. He notes her pallor, the sweat at her brow, the way her hands shake when she lifts her teacup, and still he does not guess. To him she is a woman of faith, suffering a cruel affliction. To Margaret, she is a fraud, living one life before the world, another in secret with her bottles. At night her body writhes, with restless sweats when the medicine wears thin. She prays desperately, her voice breaking, promising each time to stop. But when the morning comes, her resolve collapses with the first trembling of her hands. She drinks, she steadies, she smiles, and the cycle continues. The parsonage is quiet, but within its walls, Margaret's body is failing, her spirit faltering. Her husband believes her illness a test of endurance, a cross to be borne with faith. But Margaret knows she is not enduring. She is unraveling, and the cordial, her bitter refuge, tightens its hold with every passing day. The Hartwell townhouse lies still in the late hours. The fire in the drawing room burned low. Eleanor sits in her chair, her gown still on, though the evening's guests have long since departed. Her body is heavy, her gaze unfocused, a faint smile lingering as though she drifts between waking and dream. Her husband enters quietly, closing the door behind him. For a long moment he stands in silence, studying her. The pale face, the glassy eyes, the small vial resting carelessly at her elbow. He has seen enough. Eleanor, he says at last, his voice low but firm. This must stop. She startles, her hand moving instinctively to cover the bottle. It is medicine, she protests, her voice soft, almost pleading. The doctor himself prescribed it. You would not have me suffer, would you? Her husband steps closer, his jaw tight. Medicine perhaps, once, but now it rules you. Do you not see what you have become? Our friends whisper, the servants watch, and his voice breaks. I hardly know you anymore. Eleanor's cheeks flush. She turns her face away, shame burning hotter than the cordial ever could. You do not understand, she whispers. Without it, I cannot bear the hours. My body betrays me. I shake, I sweat, I despair. This is all that keeps me whole. Her husband's hand clenches at his side. For a moment, anger flashes in his eyes. But beneath it lies fear. Fear for his household, for his reputation, for his wife slipping further each day beyond his reach. You must stop, he insists, his tone softening but no less steady. You must. Eleanor's lips tremble. In her heart, she knows he is right. She has seen her reflection in the mirror, pale and hollow. She has felt the desperation when the bottle runs dry. She has watched herself slip further, day by day, into a life measured only in doses. And yet, she cannot yield. Not tonight. Perhaps not ever. I will try, she whispers, though even as she speaks the words, her hand presses protectively against the vial. Her husband exhales sharply, turning from her. The silence between them is colder than the night air pressing against the windows. He does not know what to do. She does not know how to stop. And so they sit in the dim glow of the dying fire, husband and wife, bound by silence, separated by the bitter cordial that holds her in its grasp. The Winslow townhouse glows with evening lamplight, the supper table set with neat precision. The children sit quietly, their plates before them, their voices hushed. Charlotte smiles faintly at them, though her eyes seem distant, her fork untouched. Her husband notices. More and more he notices. The children have grown cautious. Where once their laughter filled the room, now they glance first at their mother's face before speaking. If her expression is light, they chatter freely. If her gaze is distant, they fall silent, eating quickly, watching one another with wary eyes. Tonight, their eldest daughter musters courage. She lifts her drawing, another picture of a mother and children, hand in hand, and places it beside her mother's plate. Charlotte smiles faintly, touches the paper, then sets it aside without a word. Her daughter's face falls. Her husband sees it all. He sees the way the children measure their words, the way they tiptoe around moods they cannot name. He sees their longing for the warmth their mother once gave so freely. And he sees Charlotte, pale and trembling when the cordial wears off, bright and animated again only after she has taken her measure. That night, after the children are in bed, he speaks again. Charlotte, he says quietly, standing by the mantel, it is not only yourself who suffers. The children feel it. They see you drifting from them. They are learning silence where they should know only laughter. Charlotte looks up sharply, her hands tightening in her lap. You exaggerate. They are well cared for. I am here, am I not? He shakes his head. You are not. Not fully. They know it, even if they do not understand. And it wounds them. For a moment, her mask slips. Tears prick at her eyes, her lips trembling as though she might confess everything. But then she straightens, her voice cool once more. You cannot understand. Without the cordial, I could not rise from my bed. I take it for them, for you, for this household. Do not accuse me of neglect, when I have sacrificed myself to keep our home in order." Her husband falls silent. He sees her trembling hands, her eyes that shine with both defiance and despair. He knows the truth is deeper than she will admit, but he also knows that pressing further tonight will only drive her further away, and so he lets the silence linger, heavy and bitter. Charlotte sits by the fire, her embroidery untouched, her heart aching with guilt she cannot voice. Upstairs, the children whisper in their beds, piecing together their own quiet understanding of a mother, both present and absent. The cordial soothes her body, but it is carving a hollow in her family that no medicine can mend. The Yorkshire parsonage stands beneath a pale morning sky. The church bell tolls in the distance, summoning parishioners to prayer. Inside, Margaret Thornfield prepares slowly, her body heavy, her hands trembling as she pins her shawl. Her husband waits by the door, Bible in hand, his face lined with concern. He has grown used to her weakness, her frequent headaches, her sudden chills, her quiet refusals to join him in parish visits. But today her frailty is undeniable. "Margaret," he says gently, "you are not well enough for service." She forces a faint smile. "I will come, I must." And yet, as they step outside, her strength falters, her knees buckle on the garden path, her hand grasping his arm for support. He steadies her, his face shadowed with alarm. "No," he insists. "Back inside. You cannot go on like this." She protests weakly, but he guides her firmly back into the parsonage, settling her in the chair by the fire. The maid hovers nearby, wringing her hands, her eyes darting to the cupboard where Margaret keeps her secret. Alone again, Margaret sinks into the chair, her breath ragged. The bottle calls to her. She resists for a moment, whispering a prayer, but her body trembles with the familiar torment. At last she yields, pouring the bitter cordial into her cup, drinking swiftly. Relief spreads through her, loosening her limbs, steadying her breath. But this time her husband sees. He has returned unexpectedly, having sent a parish boy to ring the bell in his stead. He stands in the doorway, watching as she lowers the empty cup, her hands still shaking. His eyes fall to the bottle on the table. For a moment, silence hangs heavy. Margaret meets his gaze, her face pale, her lips trembling. She knows what he sees. She knows the questions he will ask, the judgment he will pass. But she cannot speak. Her shame binds her tongue. At last he turns away, his footsteps heavy as he leaves the room. The door closes softly behind him, but the weight of that silence is heavier than any accusation. Margaret sits in the chair, her body soothed, her spirit crushed. She whispers a broken prayer, but even to her own ears it sounds hollow. Her secret is no longer hidden, and yet she does not know if revelation will bring deliverance or ruin. The Hartwell townhouse is heavy with silence. The servants tread softly, their eyes lowered, for the tension in the house is palpable. Eleanor sits in her boudoir, a vial hidden in her hand, her body trembling with need. Her husband enters without knocking. His face is drawn, his voice steady but sharp. "Eleanor, enough. I will not watch you destroy yourself." She startles, clutching the vial tighter. "You do not understand," she whispers. "This is medicine. I cannot live without it." "You cannot live with it," he counters, his voice rising. "Do you not see what you've become? You drift through this house like a ghost. Our friends whisper behind their fans. Our servants pity you, and I," he falters, his anger breaking into sorrow. "I am losing my wife." Eleanor's eyes fill with tears. She longs to explain, to make him understand the torment of the hours without her cordial. The sweats, the despair, the feeling of drowning in her own body. She wants to tell him that she has tried, that each time she resolves to stop, her body betrays her. But the words fail her. Instead, she presses the vial to her lips and drinks. Her husband's face hardens. He strides forward, snatches the empty glass from her hand, and hurls it into the fireplace. It shatters with a sharp crack, the pieces scattering across the hearth. Eleanor gasps, shrinking back in her chair. "How dare you?" she cries, her voice trembling with both rage and fear. "You would see me suffer. You would see me torn apart." Her husband stands over her, his chest heaving. For a moment, neither speaks. The only sound is the crackle of the fire. At last his shoulders sag. "I do not know how to save you," he whispers. "I do not know if you can be saved." He turns and leaves the room, the door closing softly behind him. Eleanor remains in her chair, her body shaking, her mind clouded. Her tears fall silently as she stares into the fire, where the shards of glass glint among the embers. Respectability has shielded her for years, but now the mask has shattered. There is no more pretending, not to her husband, not to herself. Only the bitter truth remains. She is bound, and she does not know if she will ever be free. The Winslow nursery glows with the faint light of a single lamp. The children sit cross-legged on the floor, their toys scattered around them. But tonight, the usual laughter is absent. Instead they whisper, their voices hushed, as though afraid their words might drift beyond the door. "Mother doesn't smile like she used to," the eldest girl says softly. She clutches the picture she drew. A mother and child hand in hand, still unremarked upon. "Sometimes she looks right at me, but it feels like she doesn't see me at all." Her younger brother nods solemnly. "She's tired all the time. Maybe she's sick." The smallest child, barely old enough to understand, looks up with wide eyes. "Is she going to die?" The room falls silent. The eldest swallows hard, her little chin trembling. "No," she whispers fiercely, as though saying it aloud could make it true. "No, she won't." Downstairs, Charlotte sits in her parlour, the cordial warm in her veins. She smiles faintly at her embroidery, convinced that she is keeping her secret well. She believes her children are sheltered, that her sacrifices protect them from worry. She does not hear their whispers. Later that night, her husband tucks them into bed. The eldest clutches his sleeve. "Father," she asks softly, "why is mother always so far away?" The question strikes him harder than any accusation. He forces a smile, smoothing her hair, murmuring something about fatigue, about her delicate health. But in his heart he knows the truth. His children feel the absence as keenly as he does. When he descends the stairs, he finds Charlotte dozing by the fire, her embroidery fallen to the floor, the bottle glinting faintly at her elbow. He stands in the doorway, torn between anger and despair, between love and helplessness. Charlotte stirs, lifting her head, smiling faintly. "You are late," she murmurs, as though nothing is amiss. He says nothing, for what words could bridge the gulf between what she believes she hides and what the children already know? The cordial soothes Charlotte, but it has stolen something deeper, the laughter of her children, the warmth of her household, the trust of her husband. And though she does not see it yet, the silence around her is beginning to break. The parsonage sits beneath a low sky, rain dripping steadily from the eaves. Inside, the fire burns brightly, but the air is heavy with silence. Margaret Thornfield lies in her chair, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her face pale and drawn. Her husband stands at the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the sodden garden. His mind is troubled. For weeks he has watched his wife weaken. He has seen the bottles, seen her trembling hands, seen the relief that follows after she drinks. Until recently, he told himself it was medicine, harmless, prescribed, respectable. But now the truth presses at him with unbearable weight. His wife, the minister's wife, the paragon of virtue in his parish, is caught in something dark he can neither name nor understand. He remembers the words he has spoken from the pulpit, sermons against indulgence, against weakness of the flesh. He has preached that those who surrender to vice bring ruin upon themselves and shame upon their households. And now those very words echo back to him, cutting like knives. For how can he condemn from the pulpit what festers in his own home? Margaret stirs, lifting her eyes to his. She sees the conflict written on his face, the tension in his jaw, the weariness in his eyes. Shame floods her. She turns away, unable to bear the weight of his gaze. He longs to speak, to demand an explanation, to name the thing at last, but the words die in his throat. To accuse her would be to drag their private shame into the light. To confess it even to themselves would be to risk scandal, disgrace, the ruin of his ministry, and so he remains silent. Margaret, too, says nothing. She knows that he knows. She feels the gulf widening between them, filled with unspoken truths and prayers unanswered. She drinks when he is not looking, hides her bottles more carefully, weeps quietly into her pillow at night. He preaches on Sunday, as though nothing is amiss, his voice steady, his words full of fire. The congregation nods, unaware that their minister's own household is crumbling under the weight of a secret he dares not name. And so they live together in silence, husband and wife, parson and parishioner, bound by duty, torn apart by shame. The cordial soothes Margaret's body, but it corrodes the very foundation of their marriage. And both of them know it, though neither will speak. The Hartwell townhouse is unusually quiet, curtains drawn, lamps dimmed, servants moving softly through the halls. Eleanor sits in her boudoir, pale as porcelain, her hands twisting the fabric of her gown. Her husband has hidden the bottles. After their confrontation, he gathered every vial he could find, those in her reticule, those in her sewing box, those tucked behind books and stitched into her cloak, and locked them away. "This is for your salvation," he told her. "You will endure a few days of discomfort, and then you will be free." Eleanor nodded faintly, her lips pressed tight. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to be free. But already, her body was betraying her. The first hours were bearable, sweat at her brow, tremors in her hands. She prayed, clutched her rosary, whispered reassurances to herself. But soon the torment grew sharper. Her heart raced, pounding so hard, she thought she might faint. Her stomach twisted violently, waves of nausea leaving her too weak to rise. Her body shook uncontrollably, her limbs thrashing against the sheets. Worst of all was the despair, a suffocating blackness pressing down on her chest, whispering that she could not endure another hour, another minute, without the cordial. Her husband sat beside her at first, holding her hand, speaking softly of strength, of deliverance. But as the hours stretched into days, his patience frayed. He watched her writhe, watched her weep, watched her beg with a voice hoarse from pleading. "Just one drop," she whispered again and again. "Only a little, to ease me." He refused, his jaw set, his hands clenched. "No," he said. To give in now would be to undo everything. Eleanor turned her face from him, her sobs muffled against the pillow. She felt abandoned, betrayed, as though he were complicit in her torment. She hated him, even as some part of her knew he acted out of desperation, out of love. By the second night, she was delirious. She muttered nonsense, clawed at the sheets, cried out for her maid. Mary O'Brien hovered helplessly in the doorway, her eyes wide with pity. She wanted to help, to ease her mistress's agony, but she dared not disobey the master's command. At last, when dawn broke pale across the windows, Eleanor lay exhausted, her body limp, her eyes hollow. Her husband stood over her, his face drawn, his shoulders heavy. He told himself she had endured the worst, that soon she would recover. But Eleanor knew differently. The craving still burned within her, sharper than ever. She knew that when the first opportunity came, she would find a way to drink again, and in her heart, she whispered the bitter truth. She could not be free. The Winslow parlour is quiet, the fire burning low, the children long since tucked into bed. Charlotte sits in her chair, her embroidery untouched, her eyes half closed. The cordial bottle rests on the side table, nearly empty, its amber liquid catching the glow of the flames. Her husband stands at the mantel, his hand pressed to the wood as though steadying himself. He has watched in silence for too long. Tonight he cannot. "Charlotte," he says at last, his voice heavy, "this cannot continue." She startles, her hand reaching instinctively toward the bottle. "It is the physician's prescription," she replies quickly, her tone sharp with fear. Would you have me collapse, unable to tend our home? He shakes his head, his voice firm. I would rather have you weary than absent. The children see it, Charlotte. They feel your distance. They whisper about you in their beds, wondering why their mother no longer laughs, as she once did. Charlotte's breath catches, her hand trembling in her lap. They are children. They cannot understand. They understand more than you think, he answers quietly. Our eldest asked me why you are always so far away. Do you know how it broke me to hear those words from her mouth, to see the hurt in her eyes? Charlotte presses her hands to her face, tears spilling between her fingers. For a moment, she seems ready to break, to confess, to lay the weight of her secret bare. But the craving gnaws at her, even now, sharper than the sting of her husband's words. I cannot stop, she whispers at last. I have tried. I tell myself each day that I will. But when the hours grow long, when the shadows press in, I cannot. Her husband steps forward, kneeling beside her, his hand resting on hers. Then we must face it together. No more hiding, no more silence. For the children's sake, for ours, please, Charlotte. She lifts her tear-streaked face, her eyes searching his. She longs to believe him, to trust that he could bear the truth of her dependence. But fear clutches her still, the fear of disgrace, of failure, of what life would feel like without the cordial to dull its edges. I will try, she murmurs, though in her heart she knows the words are fragile, as fleeting as the relief the cordial brings. Her husband holds her hand tighter, as though he can anchor her by sheer force of love. The fire crackles low, casting flickering light across their faces. For a moment it seems the silence between them has broken, and yet upstairs their children stir in uneasy sleep, carrying questions no promise can yet answer. The parsonage is quiet, the rain tapping steadily against the windows. Margaret Thornfield sits in her chair by the fire, her shawl pulled close, her face pale. The cordial bottle rests on the small table beside her, its glass glinting faintly in the lamplight. Her husband enters, his Bible in hand. He pauses in the doorway, watching her. For weeks he has lived in silence, convincing himself that her frailty was nothing more than poor health. But the truth presses on him now, with undeniable weight. Margaret, he says softly, his voice heavy, we can no longer pretend. She stiffens, her fingers tightening on the edge of her shawl. Pretend what? She murmurs, though her eyes flicker toward the bottle. He steps closer, his gaze fixed on her. I have seen it. The bottles, the trembling, the way you change when you drink. This is not medicine, it is a chain. Her face crumples. She turns her head away, tears sliding down her cheeks. You do not understand, she whispers. Without it, I am nothing. My body betrays me. My mind collapses. I have prayed. I have sworn. I have begged for deliverance. But I cannot stop. He sinks into the chair opposite, his hands clasped tightly around his Bible. His face is lined with anguish. And all this time, I have preached against indulgence, against weakness, against sin. What kind of shepherd am I, if my own wife is enslaved? Margaret's sobs deepen. Do not speak of me from the pulpit, she pleads. Do not let them know. They would cast us both aside. They would scorn you, mock you. I could not bear it. Her husband bows his head, torn between love and shame, faith and fear. For a long moment, the only sound is the rain against the glass. At last he reaches across the small table, lifting the bottle in his hand. Margaret gasps, reaching instinctively, but he holds it just out of her grasp. The amber liquid catches the firelight, both salvation and damnation in its glow. We cannot go on like this, he says quietly, not hidden, not silent. If we are to endure, Margaret, we must face the truth together. But I do not know if I am strong enough. Margaret's hands tremble, reaching, pleading, but he sets the bottle down between them, as though daring her to choose. The fire crackles, the rain falls harder, and in the small parsonage, a minister and his wife sit on opposite sides of a table, bound by love, faith, and the bitter cordial that threatens to undo them both. The Hartwell townhouse lies in gloom. its curtains drawn, its servants whispering in the halls. Upstairs, Eleanor sits in her boudoir, pale as ivory, her eyes hollow. Her husband's attempt to free her has failed. The bottles were hidden, locked away, denied her hand. For days she writhed, begged, and wept, her body a battlefield of torment. And now she has surrendered. Mary O'Brien, loyal and silent, has smuggled a fresh vial into the house. Eleanor clutches it now, her fingers trembling, as though with reverence. She pours, she drinks, and at once the storm inside her stills. Her heart steadies, her breath eases, her body loosens into a fragile calm. Tears stream down her cheeks, not from relief, but from shame. She knows she has undone everything, that all her husband's stern resolve, all her own desperate prayers, have been swept aside by a single sip, and yet she cannot regret it. The agony was too great, the craving too sharp. When her husband enters, she hides the vial quickly, her hands still damp from her tears. He studies her face, sees the change, the soft fog of ease settling over her features. For a long moment, he says nothing, his jaw tightens, his eyes darken, and then he turns away. He does not ask. He does not need to. The silence between them tells the truth. That night, they sit opposite one another, at the supper table, the candles flickering, the silver untouched. Eleanor forces small bites, smiling faintly when he looks her way. He nods in silence, though his eyes no longer meet hers. Respectability still shields them from the world, but within their walls, the shield is shattered. Upstairs, when the house grows quiet, Eleanor drinks again. She tells herself it is only to sleep, only to still the trembling. But deep inside, she knows she is lost to it. The cordial is no longer a comfort. It is her master, and she cannot imagine life without it. The lamps are dimming now. Across 3 distant homes, Boston, Yorkshire, London, the same shadows gather, soft and heavy, as night presses in. Charlotte Winslow sits by her parlour fire, her embroidery fallen, the cordial bottle glinting faintly on the table beside her. Her husband has retreated in silence. Their children whisper in uneasy sleep, upstairs. Charlotte tells herself she will try again tomorrow, try to stop, try to be present, try to be whole. But tonight, she lifts the glass once more, the warmth spreading as her tears fall unseen. In Yorkshire, Margaret Thornfield lies in her chair, her shawl wrapped close, her husband's Bible resting on the table between them. The cordial bottle stands beside it, a cruel rival to Scripture. She gazes at it with both longing and loathing, her husband watching from across the firelight, torn between love and despair. She whispers a broken prayer, though she no longer believes it will rise above the rafters. And in London, Eleanor Hartwell reclines in her boudoir, her gown loosened, her face pale, the vial hidden in her hands. Her husband has withdrawn to his study, the silence between them colder than any words. She drinks quickly, desperately, her eyes closing as the bitter medicine soothes her body, but leaves her spirit hollow. 3 women, worlds apart, bound by the same amber liquid, the same silence, the same web of respectability that hides and destroys. This was the unspoken epidemic of the age, not whispered in scandal sheets, not shouted in pulpits, but lived quietly behind lace curtains and polished doors. 1,000 small tragedies, unfolding in drawing rooms and nurseries, parsonages and townhouses. And as the night deepens, you realize their stories are not unique. Charlotte, Margaret, Eleanor, just 3 names among countless others. Their bottles gleam faintly in the firelight, their secrets safe within their walls, their lives unraveling drop by drop. The world outside goes on, carriages rattling, bells tolling, children laughing. But here, in these quiet rooms, history lingers in shadows, the story of an epidemic cloaked not in scandal, but in silence. And so the candles burn low, their flames flickering softer, their glow wrapping the room in gentle light. Nightfall has come, and with it, the close of this chapter. Thank you for spending this time with me, friends. If you found this story calming, Or if you'd like to join me for more quiet walks through history, do consider subscribing. It helps keep the candles burning here, and I'd love to have you back each week. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from right now? Is it morning where you are? Or are you already drifting off to sleep? Until next time, rest well, sleep deeply, and I'll see you again soon, here at Candlelit History.